Stephanie, all you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I love my voice on the microphone. It's not nice thing. I don't sing at all, he said. So I've been working in public relations now for the past 20 years or so, actually, and I've spent a lot of time working specifically with charter schools and charter school authorizers. So I'm pretty familiar with some of the concerns that you have, and in fact, have even helped some of the authorizers and schools around the state with the response to the request stuff. Because I know that a lot of you have heard me, possibly before on the webinar, I don't want to spend a lot of time giving you the same content. So what I'm going to do is try to boil this down for you and give you some practical tips for building public relations and communications efforts into your day-to-day work. With all that you have going on with the regulatory, the policy requirements, and just, my gosh, your actual main job, which is the education of children, it seems unfair to ask you to put public relations and communications into your daily schedule and to be intentional about it. However, of all of the work that you do and the work that we collectively do as a charter sector, this is perhaps one of the most important to protecting ourselves and ensuring that issues don't spiral out of control. So I'm going to start with two pieces of advice that if you don't remember anything else that I say, I want you to take these two pieces of advice home. One of them I found actually in my lazy time on Pinterest, and I think it is probably one of the more profound things, which makes me think I should deduct the time that I spend on Pinterest. But beyond that, it said, live in such a way that if somebody heard something bad about you, they'd never believe it. And that is, in a nutshell, it's a fundamental core precept of PR. Many of us feel this way. Data and surveys over generations have shown that when people talk about Congress, for instance, we all hate Congress, but we like our local guy. We all hate education. We think it's doing badly for kids today. You know, we've all read A Nation at Risk. We're all freaked out, but we really like our local people. They are doing good work. You too can capitalize on this, and you should be capitalizing on this. In this day and age, we all control our own messages more than ever before, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, I want to give you the second piece of advice. This one comes from my mother, and is something that I have grown up with over the years, all my life. Basically, she always would tell me, put yourself in the other guy's shoes. You probably have heard this from your folks too. You need to take yourself out of your own perspective, your own paradigm, and put yourself in the shoes of the person that you're trying to communicate to. Many times their paradigm is completely different than yours. You know this. You are, all of you as educators, trying to ensure that you are delivering messages in a way that are going to resonate with students, right? So you're familiar with how to do this. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time telling you how to do it, but I do want you to remember it because it doesn't apply to just your students. You also need to be differentiating the instruction you provide to folks in your community. You have different audiences. You have parents, you have local and state policymakers, you have media, you have community, business partners, different folks that you're trying to interact and engage with, and you need to be making sure that you translate your message to those folks in a way that's going to make some sense and resonate with them. So put yourself in their shoes. So new rules of marketing and PR, easy and cheap ways to promote your organization, ways of managing bad news, and how to engage in effective on-camera interviews. If we have time for that, I'm going to try to get to it. I have a couple of really quick cheats that will help everybody, and they're pretty simple. So we'll kind of gloss through this stuff. So marketing and PR has changed dramatically just in the last 20 years since I've been involved with it. It used to be you put out a press release, you'd hope somebody ran it. You might get a call from a reporter, you probably wouldn't. And so the view of what you could control and the messaging that you were trying to get out there was very, very difficult. It was costly. If you wanted to make sure a lot of people knew about you, you could buy a billboard, you could run a TV ad. But those are really, really expensive. The internet has changed all of that. Now we all publish our own content. We don't have to wait for the local newspaper to pick up our story. We can put it out there ourselves on social media and on our own websites, and we have control of that. The downside of the internet is that it has an incredibly long tail. If I Google myself, I'm not going to see just the press release I put out last week or the good news that I wanted to share with you today. I'm going to see what I did 5 years ago that some guy didn't like, and he chose to put a comment on Google or Facebook, or worse, on a media site. I went out for a client recently, and they were thinking about running a piece on a professor at their university. And I went out and found all kinds of horrible, horrible feedback about that professor. So then our task became not just how are we going to tell the story about this professor, but how are we going to put ourselves again in the audience's shoes and try to come back at some of the negative feedback that's out there. There are conversations, I guess, in Europe about how to make the internet forget us. But the internet, for most of us, and the plain truth is, we aren't forgotten anymore. Our history is out there. That photograph that you put out on Facebook the night you went out and had a great time with your friends, that's there now. And so we all have to manage that. The good news is that because of social media and because of the internet and the fact that we are our own publishers, imagination is so much more important than money. We can do some really exciting things that can go, there's the big viral, but most of us can't really achieve that. We want to go locally viral. We want to have people who know us and see us think of us in a different way. The other rule that I think is really critical is to follow up. Many times in the old days, we would put out a press release, we'd wait, things would happen, and then we'd be like, okay, well, we're on to the next thing. Following up is incredibly important. You need to follow up, you need to look at the coverage you got, make sure that it said what you wanted it to say. You can correct. Reporters are always running retractions and corrections. As a former reporter myself, I've had to do it. It's part of the world we live in. But we also need to follow up with people who are unhappy with us. Those of you who were on the webinar with me some time ago may remember me telling you the story of our local superintendent in DeWitt, Michigan. This is a pretty classic one because it's an example of where an issue that didn't have to be an issue became one. Local high school teacher was teaching a book that was fairly controversial. I don't remember the name of it at this point, but it was pretty rough. I think it opened with some kind of a sexual situation, and it escalated to, zombies and all kinds of bad stuff. So the parent, going through the kid's backpack, pulls out the book, sees it, and calls the school. And she gets put through to the superintendent's office. The superintendent's like, well, you need to fill out a form. If you have a concern, you fill out a form, that's our protocol, and we'll deal with it in the order it was received. And so she fills out the form, no response. No response. This is the point where follow-up would have been really, really helpful. So the parent gets frustrated. She goes to the school board. The school board listens to her and says, well, we have a process for that, so you're going to need to go through the proper protocols, et cetera, et cetera. So the parent is growing more and more and more unsatisfied. By this point, her kid's read the book. She's talked to other parents in the community. They're all in a dither about it. And next thing you know, it's on the front page of the Lansing State Journal. And so, that was a situation where a little bit of early involvement, a little bit of early control of the messaging could have saved and spared the school all kinds of difficult situations. So I want to really make that point to you. Managing issues early is pretty critical. So in the new paradigm of marketing and PR, I use this little bullet thing as a pretty key point. These are the things that are in our control, the stuff we publish ourselves, the press releases, our web content, social media content, and the experiences that families and students have when they're on our campuses. This is all stuff we manage. Things that we influence, but don't necessarily control, as Nick just described, is when we're talking to a reporter, when we're interacting with the public. People bring their own perceptions. They view everything through their own filters. So we have an opportunity to influence it, but we can't control it. And then there are things that are completely out of our control. What your opponents are going to say, and what we don't know or can't fix. This is what has happened with the free press. That is so beyond our control and has been beyond our control for the better part of a year. So now we're left fighting our battle out here. And that's not where we want to be. We always want to be in here because we want people to think so well of us that they can't believe what happens out here. And unfortunately, we're not there. So how do we get back there? That's a pretty significant question. Pathway to Great Messaging. It really is about telling our story. We tell our story every single day through every single interaction. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is really how do you write and how do you present things in ways that folks are going to understand. I do a messaging exercise here. I'm not going to have you do it, but I am going to tell you that in many areas, schools tend to forget who they're talking to because they're so concerned about what's going on in their own paradigms. And this is a traditional school problem as well as a charter school problem, I think. And I raise it for you because we live in a world where there are acronyms for everything. We value the things that we have going on over the things that our audience is looking for from us. So in this exercise, if you read it through, the text uses a lot of acronym, it uses a lot of inside baseball terminology. Now imagine that you are a parent of a student, you dropped out of school yourself, you now have a student who's eligible for free and reduced lunch, money is tough, you want good educational opportunities for your kid and you're not sure how to get them. So if I read that through that lens, I don't care that your teachers are all Harvard educated. You can feel good about that. But what I'm going to care about is, will my kid be cared for? Will he be safe? What's going on at your school? I want that right magic fit. As a parent, I've had to exercise some school choices for my kids, and every child is different. And you just want the fit, and you want the recipe to be right so that the kid goes to school happy and that they're learning and not failing. So you have to flip everything you write so that instead of saying our teachers are Harvard educated and we're making AYP every year, you want to say our top priority is your child. Our top priority is making sure that we're getting the results you expect, and we're bringing everything we have to that point. That's what's going to resonate. So, this is where the money is. We all have collateral material that we're familiar with. You can produce fancy brochures about your school. You can put together websites and videos and blogs, and you can be out there on social media. That's a lot of time-intensive effort, but it could pay off if you do it smartly. You don't want to spend a lot of time on defense. I would actually recommend that rather than doing the fancy brochure, you spend most of your time trying to get people to your campus. Because every experience that you give needs to be authentic. Too often I see clients where the message doesn't match up with the feeling that people get on campus. I have clients that will talk a lot about, oh, we want you to be our partner, we want you to do this, and then when you come to campus, it's very stiff and formal, and it just doesn't jive. You don't get the same feeling that you do from the printed pieces that you spent $30,000 and a lot of time crafting text for. So there are lots of ways for you to interact personally with folks. A lot of lawmakers, for instance, thinking about this Detroit Free Press situation that we have going on, lawmakers, especially during a campaign cycle, have coffees in their districts. They want to talk to constituents. They want to meet with you and hear what your concerns are so that they can add you to their list of supporters or so that they can tap into the issues you've described to them. So they want to have, you can go to a coffee any old day, find out when they are, sit down with a lawmaker and share some of your concerns about, teacher evaluation policy or charter school policy and what you believe should be happening, what's in the best interest of kids. Again, flip your messaging, put yourself in that lawmaker's shoes. What are they hoping to hear from you? And then invite them to your campus. The best thing you can do actually would be to talk to them about having an event for that legislator on your campus. That brings new people who aren't familiar with you to your school. It gives them a chance to see what you're doing and what you're all about. And the next time something comes up, whether it's a reporter or a legislator or a policy maker at the regulatory level, they'll think of you. And you might get a phone call asking your view. And they will stop believing any bad thing about you and start to think, no, this school is different. I've been there and I've seen what they have to offer. So that would be one piece of advice. I know that there are lots of other ways of getting people to come to your campus and understand you. And that's a great way for you not only to support strong community and local messaging, it's also a great way to build student enrollment, as we all know. And that's the bottom line. The other way to really be smart about affordably getting your message out is to participate in online conversations. If you read the Free Press coverage, you undoubtedly saw at the bottom that there were places for people to leave comments. People do. And folks read those comments. Reporters, legislators, the public, I read them all the time, and I'm not even there to do that. I'm just hoping for, good outcome, but often the comments are more entertaining than the story. So, you can go and be part of those conversations too. In fact, if you're not already doing it, you should have a Google alert for yourself, for your institution on your email. Once a day, Google will go out, it will check and Google you, your organization, and it'll pop back into your email if anything shows up. It's free, and that's a great way for you to get out there and monitor what people are saying about you. It's not just searching news stories, it's searching the entire internet. So if somebody posts a bad remark about you on Yelp or whatever, then you're there. You can find it and you can respond to it. You want to be sure when you respond that you do it smartly. You don't want to post things that are irrelevant, inflammatory, difficult, that don't fit or stay in keeping with your brand identity and what you want to be. So be judicious about it, but get involved. Try to change the conversation. You can do that through those types of responses. The other thing you want to do is, again, show, don't tell. And most importantly of all, you want to have what I think of as a street team. A street team are those people who support you, who believe in your organization so strongly that when something happens, they're going to come to your defense. It's really critical. You have a group of people so that when you put out a news release, for instance, or when your MEEP data hits, that's a better example. Your MEEP data hits, you've got 3 people in your community who are going to respond to or be part of an initiative to say, hey, yeah, that's good. That's better than what we've seen before. This is a great school. It's a great asset to the community, and we're glad to see they're delivering proven results. When there's a bad news story, your street team is going to come to your defense. They'll be there for you, and people will know that you've got support locally. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes here on what not to do. People get involved and eager to take part in PR and marketing, and if you drop the ball, if you don't follow up, you can make some mistakes. The guy with the guitar here is from United. It's a story about United Airlines. He went viral. He was in a band and traveling someplace, and United, he saw from the tarmac, United bag handlers were throwing the guitars around. And so he arrived at his destination, the guitar was broken, and he called United. United didn't respond, same mistake. They tried to put him through channels, they just didn't do it. So he got so frustrated that he actually wrote a song about it and made a music video and posted it online. If you have an opportunity, it's actually pretty clever. Catchy tune, funny to do, and United lost a significant amount of money as a result of people refusing to fly their airline after that. The other thing that people, again, not putting themselves in the position of their customers, Netflix. Netflix raised prices and then asked for customer feedback on their website. So the customer feedback, of course, was very, very negative. They weren't responsive to the concerns of their customers. And now Netflix has this long tail of negative feedback when you Google them. This Kenneth Cole tweet is particularly fun. They were not sensitive to consumer issues. Millions are in uproar in Cairo. Rumor is they heard our new spring collection is now available online. you need to show yourself as being pretty sensitive to the needs of the people that are working with you. The Coastal Concordia, that ship, when it sank, first thing that that company did was to take down all of its social media. So at a time when folks were trying to get answers to what was going on, maybe they had a loved one on the ship, they said, oh, we've got a crisis, we're shutting down all our communications channels. That's actually the last thing you should do. Anytime that anything happens that you are concerned your public is going to react to, you need to be communicating more than ever rather than simply shutting it down. It's also important to be careful about who's handling your media. We've heard, and I think the tweet on the right, or no, this one here in the middle is probably the most famous. I find it ironic that Detroit is known as the Motor City, and yet no one here knows how to bleeping drive. That was accidentally released by a Chrysler employee using the Chrysler Twitter feed. So, and there was another example from the Red Cross. So if people make mistakes, you got to be really, really, really careful. The Red Cross rogue tweet from Red Cross, due to my inability to use Hootsuite, I wasn't actually getting slizzard, but just excited. So don't just turn it over to an intern and hope for the best. Be smart and make sure that you're getting the information out. Another thing not to do, don't get combative. If you ever Google Amy's Baking Company, you'll see a string of Facebook response. Somebody gave her bad feedback, and so she got on there, and so I think it culminated in a lot of swearing. And this one, I am not stupid, all of you are, you just do not know good food. It is not uncommon to resell things Walmart does not make their electronics or toys, so lay off. I mean, not only is it combative, but it's all in caps, which as we know is yelling, right? And it's not punctuated, and it's a giant run-on sentence. So I'm sure you're all aware of this, but as schools, it's incumbent upon you to use good grammar, good punctuation. And on that point here, we've got some editing problems. So fun they won't even know they're learning, THEIR. There was another one over here. It's another school website. It's hard to read on that feed, but same thing, punctuation, grammar. It's really pretty important. So, how to share your opinion. In light of the free press stuff, we've all probably been asked to do that, right? I know I've written probably 50 letters to the editor of various publications, and I'm sure you've been asked to send a few. This can be tricky, but let's go back to what we learned in school. You want to criticize the facts, you don't want to criticize the opinions. Miss Amy's bakery there, you know, she was trying to get some facts in there, but she went on the aggressive, and that's really bad form. You always want to say, so-and-so is misunderstood or may not be aware of the fact that this has happened. You want to do your homework. The last thing you want to do is rebut somebody's factual article or opinion piece and have your facts wrong. Because that's what we do all the time, right? With the presidential elections, well, so-and-so missed this data point, so they're a loser, liar, or whatever. Don't put yourself in the position of doing that same thing. If you're writing a letter to the editor or an op-ed piece, don't cover more than 2 or 3 points. Many people try to do too many things because, like, look at the Free Press. They made so many allegations in their series of articles that, you know, it's impossible not to drift up to the 40,000-foot level where we're like, oh my gosh, we don't even know where to begin. And, you know, why are you attacking charters and why are you doing this stuff? You're better off if you go back and try to do what others are going to try to do to you, which is to attack their factual credibility. You go back and you say, you miss this fact. You miss the fact that charters are accountable, that they have publicly appointed boards, that they actually have extra accountability already over and above what their traditional peers have. All of that stuff can be said without, you know, necessarily drifting down to, well, when Summit Academy North was doing this, you know, you want to make sure you're aiming at the appropriate level of dialogue. And in the case of the Free Press, that's a tricky one to do because they had so many different things that they were trying to say. So locally, this is where your street team can help you. And this is where you can help your street team. Decide what it is you want to say, and then feed them some letters to the editor. Give them the facts about your local school, and then ask them to run with it. Run some stuff yourself, add to the comments section, and make sure that you're being as proactive and thorough and accurate as you can be. You want to keep it concise. If you're explaining, you're not selling. That's another good one to take home and needlepoint into a sampler. If you are explaining, you are not selling. I feel right now that I'm getting a little windy. And that's because I want to sell you on the fact that this is work you need to be doing. And I know I'm spending a little too much time explaining. It's got to be sound bites. Got to be sound bites. Watch your tone and use your credentials. It is a fact universally known that if you are a university professor or a medical doctor or a member of the clergy, you are unimpeachable. Yes. So anytime that you can get any one of those three, you are golden. Educators are right there. And university professors, they can be a good ally. And guess what? I think we might have access to a couple. So use that credibility that isn't necessarily earned, it's borrowed. And use your credentials to make your point. And then coordinate your efforts. If you wanted to defend Lake Superior State University, which we all do at this point, against unfounded attacks and additional regulation that's going to make all of your lives harder, you and Lake Superior State can work together. You can make that happen. You can coordinate. Okay, Southeast Michigan, we're going to do this week, this the next week, that the following week. So plan it, map it out, get out a calendar, and figure out who's doing what, when, and try to hit all of the regions in as equal and as coordinated a way as possible with, and I can't stress this enough, with the same messaging. You want to be consistent. You want to use the same wording. I was involved in the Engler campaign when he was running against Jeffrey Feiger. And that was a lot of fun for a lot of different reasons. But one of the things that I took away was anytime any of us with the Engler campaign spoke about Jeffrey Feiger, we had to use one word. We had to use radical. That was it. And if everybody was using that word, the thinking was that people would hear Jeffrey Feiger and they think radical. And it worked. In Lansing, we have Mayor Bernero, the angry mayor. Everybody says that. It's his name. It's his nickname. He's the angry mayor. He'll probably not succeed in running for governor again. So you want to make those same word associations. What is it that you as a school want to be known for? Use that word. Use it all the time. Use it until you're just absolutely sick to death of it. But people don't listen as well as you do to the things you're saying. So you need to be ready for that. So as a master messenger, here's some great advice. You want to have a goal for every single appearance, whether the camera is there or not, whether it's just a group of folks that are coming to tour your building. You want to have a goal. What do I want them to think when they leave me? You want to be prepared and you want to be camera ready. So here's some practical stuff. Don't wear white. Don't wear a busy pattern. Wear a light color, maybe pale blue. Pink is good sometimes if it's an okay shade. Maybe a light gray, buff. Because the camera will reflect colors back on you, and the last thing you want to do is be on TV and look green or look ill. Think Richard Nixon. You want to be polished, poised like John F. Kennedy. You want to watch your body language. There are some really pretty profound examples. People get uncomfortable. Their upper lip starts to sweat. They might go like this. Or my husband does this. He gets nervous and he starts to cover his mouth. If you touch your mouth or your nose, you're lying. So people know that. So keep your hands down. Use gestures, but make them comfortable gestures. Stay on, yeah, don't be stiff. You want to be relaxed. Okay, so I'm going to do this now because it's really good advice to just have if you're going to be on camera. Most of the time, you're doing a taped interview. News crews don't generally have time for live stuff. They want to get it in the can so that they can run it when they want to. So take advantage of that. And radios are the same way. They'll call you and they'll do a taped radio interview. So let's say that they start to trap you into saying something you don't want to say. Like Lake State, well, they're good, but they do have, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, I'm going in a bad path. What do? Sneeze, cough. Sneeze and cough. You'll ruin the tape, and they can't use it, and then you can say to them in a really friendly way, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, can I start that again? And of course they will say yes, and they will edit you out. So be absolutely crystal about that. If you're live and that happens, you can muffle a little bit. You can do kind of the same thing, but practice your fake sneeze because it's worth having a good one. So you want to learn how to bridge. Because it's all about the soundbite. If you're explaining, you're not selling. Reporters don't want you to get lost in the weeds of what you're trying to do. So what you want to. But your goal, you've got a goal, right? You thought about this in advance, and you have a specific thing that you want people to take away. And so your idea is to not let them leave a point before you're ready, and you want to get them back to a point if they're trying to drill you off and make you say bad stuff. So you want to say things like, and we all hear this on the news all the time, Barack Obama, let me be perfectly clear. We have all heard these kinds of statements. Before we get off topic, let me come back. I do want to say this one thing. Let me put that in perspective for you. One thing that I've heard a lot, and it's actually becoming a pet peeve of mine, even though I do it too, is a lot of times on the news, we'll hear politicians or spokespeople who are starting to get combative, and they'll always say, look. And that is designed to catch you and make you feel like, what, am I missing something? And then, you're going to come back and then they get to say whatever awful, scurrilous thing they want to say because they said, look. It does tend to stop the conversation. It's uncomfortable for people, but people do it. And it is a good bridging technique because that stops you and it stops the reporter from dragging you off into the hinterlands where you don't want to be. After your interview is over, this is, again, follow-up. You need to go back and you need to look at it. None of us wants to hear ourselves on camera. None of us wants to look at our faces and see and think how we added 10 pounds or whatever it is. But we all have to do it because we all have bad habits that we need to stop doing. I noticed for a long time, I worked for the Treasury Department, and I have a habit of scratching my ear. And it's not a lying thing, it's just my ear itches. And I didn't realize it until I went back and looked at my coverage and I started seeing this motion. And so I really, really worked at, I always have to be thinking, keep my hand down. I will hear myself start to explain, I hate my voice. And so, I actually for a while thought I would start smoking so that I could get all Kathleen Turner and not be like, and the personal property tax needs to be repealed because, so listen to yourself. Try to figure out how you can make yourself more the presence you want to be on camera. Actors do that. Politicians do it. They go back and they play the tape and they try to figure out how they can make their appearances better next time. So here's a trick for you as a school. You've got to know how to deliver some bad news, right? Somebody just brought a gun into your building. You've got a problem. You need to fix it. So what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? First thing you got to do, you got to be timely. You're not going to shut down your social media. You're going to, if you have an alert system for families, for anybody else, you're going to activate it. And you're going to call the reporters. Actually, CMU, as an authorizer, had a school recently where a gun was brought on campus, and they got on the phone and started calling and said, this is happening, we're on the situation, And that, just that simple reassurance, you can deflate an entire story right there. Because the follow-up that the media is looking for is, who wasn't paying attention? How did they get in the building? What happened? But you can say, we were on it, we discovered it, we wanted to let you know right away. And the story's gone. You're going to describe always your next steps. What are you doing to fix the situation? What's next? So the reporter knows when to call you back. Next week, we filed a lawsuit today. We expect it to go to hearing on June 18th. And they know then on June 18th you can expect a call. And that's a great way for you to control your messaging because you've just controlled the timing of it. So you're ready. You can be dressed in your non-white green face outfit and you can be prepared for the news story. Another thing you don't want to do, you don't want to blame people. I heard Brad Weaver from CMU gave an interview on this whole Detroit Free Press stuff, and they tried to get Brad to say that CMU was a better authorizer than everybody else in the state, and that there were bad authorizers out there that somebody needed to fix. Brad did a fantastic job. I highly recommend Googling the story if you can find it, because he was like, look, I'm not going to do that. This is not, every authorizer is different. Every school is different. We all believe that the laws are appropriate to ferret out issues where something's been done incorrectly. And we think that, we've got a good path going forward. So he got himself back on messaging. So if you have, again, at the beginning of the interview, you've got that message, what is my takeaway today? Jeffrey Feiger's radical. If everything I say is going to come back and feed into these radical, disconnected plans for Michigan, that kind of stuff. So you want to know, if I could distill into one sentence, what is my message? What is my takeaway for today? And let that takeaway be your guide. Don't get tempted to drift off into all speculation and all that. Your worst enemy is speculation. You need to deal with facts. You need to deal with your plan, your agenda, how you're communicating it, and how calm you are. That's going to be, except when you're seized by a sudden coughing fit. But other than that, you're reassuring, you're calm. So as you sit with your team this fall, one thing you might want to do is think about, okay, we know our mission, right? We know our vision and values, and we've got all of that stuff. What's our identity? What do people say about us in the community? If you haven't done a survey in a while, not just of your families and students and parents, but of the community at large. It doesn't have to be anything formal. You can take the mayor out to lunch and find out, just do an interview, have a little mental list of questions that you want to know how people feel about you. Typically, before I take on a client, I will call people the client works with and find out what the perceptions are around that client, because it's not that I'm trying to screen or vet them. I want to know what I'm dealing with. If I think that I've got this whole safe school excellence thing going on, but it turns out that people think that only the worst of the worst come to my school and I have to have police at the door every morning and it's a bad deal and nobody knows the facts, that's a reality I got to change, and I got to change it now. So the best advice I can give, as with anything else, is just like school improvement. You start with your data, you look at where you are today, you look at where you want to be, and you and your team can work together on that, and then you create a plan. And it should be a coordinated plan. You want to involve your partners. You want to be a partner to other organizations that can help you so that you have those strategic alliances in place, and then you map it out. And just along the lines of your school improvement plan, in fact, it probably ought to be woven in there. I know that it is a piece of it. The public and community relations, I think, is a piece of that has to go into your plan. And so how are you going to build it? And who's going to be responsible for it? Somebody should be accountable for your media. Because the last thing you want is for some big thing to blow up and somebody to say, well, who's been communicating for us? Well, it was the administrator's job. And guess what? The administrator has 600 jobs in a particular day. And so you need to have some support for yourself, and you need to be constantly thinking about this. It ought to be in the fabric of every single thing you do. I do have some videos that I can play sometimes to talk about what went right and wrong in media appearances. But I think what I'd rather do is actually spend some time. I've got 3 books. If I were to prioritize which ones you should be reading first, I'd start with this one, The New Rules of Marketing and PR. It's fantastic. And it will help you think about the elements of what should go into a plan. Guerrilla marketing is number 2. This one is how to do really effective marketing on a dime. I learned so much from this book, and my clients use this stuff all the time. Marketing to the social web is I would see that as more of a primer if you're less comfortable with Twitter and Facebook and stuff. That's a really good way to get comfortable with it. It does help with how to monitor your online identity and how to make sure that it is what you need it to be. But it really is just the one aspect of marketing and public relations. And so for that reason, I really favor the other 2 books first. So let's talk for a minute about the free press. I have seen an awful lot of attention paid to the authorizer piece of this. I have not seen very much attention paid to the school end of this. Are you feeling that in your communities? Have you gotten any blowback as a result of those articles? Yeah?
So, I mean, we're still dealing with, we're still dealing with what we 20 years ago, with the shoulder return.
Okay.
A lot of what came out from those articles, if you read the comments, if you talk about, you go on forever, it's the whole, parts of schools are taking a picture of the copy, all that stuff came out. It's all false.
Yeah.
That's what worries me. So, I mean, there's some clever responses in there from reputable people, and I think it was defended pretty well.
Yeah.
It was so heavy, short time.
It was, and unfortunately, that's the reality we're still dealing with. I would argue that as a sector, charters have not been effective at fighting off some of the myths that continue to pervade everything that we do. There was a time where we had an ally in the Michigan Department of Education, and I would think that we're drifting away from that time a little bit. And that's unfortunate because we really could use that MDE ally right now. The sad outcome of the free press stuff is probably going to result in additional rules for authorizers, and that's unfortunate. One of the things, and just thinking through, and again, kind of trying to reinforce some of the ideas I just shared with you, how to combat that, how to be anticipating and knowing that that's on the horizon and be ready to deal with it. One of the conversations, I used to be with the Charter School Authorizers Council, and one of the conversations we had at that time was the idea of like an accreditation system for authorizers, where we would regulate ourselves. We had standards, we'd hold ourselves to those standards, and then we'd regulate ourselves so that when a story like this happened, we could say we've already got that covered, and the department wouldn't really have a leg to stand on. Unfortunately, we didn't act, and I think there are lots and lots of really good reasons why we didn't do that. But think about your own situation. Are there things that could be said about you? This is, again, your reality. What are you facing? And are there long-term things you can be doing to proactively defend against allegations that you've done something wrong? Yeah?
Didn't the state superintendent consult any charter school players before you rolled that out?
No. I mean, he consulted.
That was really what anything even worse.
Right. He consulted with Greg Richmond, who unfortunately didn't consult with anyone either that I am aware of. And so we ended up in a pickle where suddenly somebody at the national level has standards. We already have standards here in Michigan for authorizers. And the authorizers are all holding themselves accountable for it, but nobody knew it. And so suddenly the national standards are the gold thing that we all are looking at, and Flanagan spoke, as he is wont to do, too quickly, without checking everything, and he could, because the political environment was right. And if he didn't, I mean, think about it, again, let's put ourselves in Flanagan's shoes. From his perspective, if he stands there while all these articles are coming out, he looks like he's not doing his job. So he had to do something.
What he should have done is said, all right, I'm gonna do a thorough investigation.
Right.
Instead of saying, we're gonna drop the camera and also
Right. But now the ship has sailed. And so now we're all in this world where suddenly we're going to have even more accountability than we already have. Gary Nair at the Great Lakes Education Project, I think he and MAPSA have been working on this pledge where traditional schools are going to sign this commitment to hold themselves to the same levels of accountability that charters do. That's a pretty interesting idea. Hasn't gone anywhere. I don't think anybody has signed it. But you know, it's interesting to see that. So now here we are. The articles have run. We knew they were going to run for about a year, and so we used that time to develop letters to the editor and develop all of this stuff to be ready to respond. But we were doing it without knowing what they were going to say. Would have, you know, set Monday morning quarterbacking. We could have gone back and used the year to shore up and communicate proactively about the standards. I think what happened is that we were all getting ready to defend, and nobody got out in front. And now we're kind of paying the price. We had a year to get out in front of that issue, and we didn't. So now what do? The ideas are pretty slim because we're in a defensive posture. We're in that outer ring of the things that we can't control. So what we as a sector, as an industry, and a group of schools and educators have to do is try to bring it back in as quickly as possible. And the ways to do that are through the tools I just described. Shoring up an online presence, really working with the folks in your community, so bringing them to your campus, making sure they understand who you are, making sure they understand the basics, like all students are welcome here, that we test. And you know, the for-profit piece, I really think is the toughie, and I really think at its heart that that's what all of this stuff is about. You know, I have heard people take a variety of different approaches to this. You know, one of the more effective that I've heard was actually one of the most uncomfortable. I sat with somebody who'd been with the charter movement since the beginning, and she sat there and she's like, when did profit get to be a bad word? Why is it that we can't make a profit in this country anymore? If you don't believe in profit, you don't believe in America. And I'm like, whoa, you know, that's them's fighting words. And it struck me off, but it made me stop, made me think. I mean, it definitely was an effective rebuttal to the extent that it pushed the accuser back on his or her heels. I think that what the other outcome that we have yet to anticipate is the fact that I believe that all of the management company records are going to become open to public scrutiny before this is all over. If I were a management company, I'd be hot to get out in front of this with some anti-American, you know, when did profit become a bad word kind of a thing. There may be some unlikely bedfellows here. Who are some other organizations that are okay making a profit? You know, I think about some healthcare groups. I think about some, you know, public services that have been privatized. There are an awful lot of vendors out there. You know, and this is the really maddening part. Traditional schools use them too. Textbook companies. Why aren't we looking at textbook company profits if we're going to be concerned about that? You know, there are a whole fleet of talking points that could be made up here to really get after and turn it around. Just always turn it around. Jim Gunner from CMU used to go on. He had a thing that he said a lot about, we ought to be like the environmental groups. You know, it's if you go after an environmental group, people are like, what? You don't care about the environment? That's not okay. And you know, it's sort of like how we've changed the language around ethnicity and all of this other stuff because we all are politically correct. Charter schools, parental choice should be so politically correct that you can't say anything against it. And instead, we've gotten lost in this whole for-profit thing, and that's the issue. So we need to figure out a way of changing that headline pretty quickly. And I think it is going to take an awful lot of coordinated effort. I hope that at this year's MAPSA conference and at some of the fall events that start to happen, that this is an ongoing and proactive part of dialogue, because it will take planning, not just from all of the Lake State schools or from the CMU schools or MAPSA or anything. It's going to take a highly coordinated, relentless drumbeat of messaging and tools. Every tool in the toolbox that we got needs to be used. But from where you sit today, it has to begin with you, because you need to protect your local institution first, right? And so you need to make sure that people understand who you are, that they see you, that they know your kids, that they know your families, and then ultimately that will expand and swell into the larger effort and the larger good that we're trying to do here. So I know I've said an awful lot, and yeah, do you have questions?
I remember the webinar, and I remember you saying that no comment is a bad thing.
Yes.
So I don't know if I'm missing myself now.
No, I didn't say that. Yeah.
But that was shocking to me, because I was thinking, hey, maybe that's a safe zone.
No.
No comment. Leave it one way. Why is it bad?
No comment is about the worst thing you can say, because it shows not just the fact that you're not ready to talk, and so you must have something to hide, but it also shows that you're not going to be responsive. So let me give you that, come back to that DeWitt example where the book was on the front page of the Lansing State Journal. Lansing State Journal, back to the DeWitt superintendent, they were going to run a point-counterpoint in their op-ed section about this book. And so the mother who originally found the book and lodged the complaint was the first op-ed. So she ran this very, fact-based, here's what I did, here's what happened. And they went to DeWitt, and they gave DeWitt an opportunity to write the rebuttal, the superintendent. He said no. So that left his whole point of view out of the equation. Silence is sometimes more damning than words. And so he damned himself. So they went and they found an MSU professor who was willing to go on record and defend the need for all kinds of literature in the classroom. And basically the response was, we know better because we're teachers. And so the DeWitt superintendent lost any footing he had. And moreover, it made him seem unresponsive. It made him seem like he had something to hide. If you say no comment, you can always find something to say. Even if your comment is, let's say that somebody brings a gun into your building, you've got law around this now. You've got maybe a legal action or a lawsuit or something that's going on, and so you can't comment. You can still find something to say. You can say, well, I'm not supposed to, my lawyers have said that I'm not really supposed to talk about the stuff that's related to the legal action, but I can tell you, we focus on safety. That is our fundamental concern each and every day. That's what our students and families believe in, is safety. Here's what else we believe. You can talk about some big things, and that makes you look at least awake, and you're there. You're not hiding anything. You're just trying to tell your story in whatever way you can. Every time a reporter calls you, it's an opportunity to tell your story. You should not be afraid of it. Reporters are people just like you are. I have made some colossal blunders with the media. And if I'm friendly, if I'm open, and they know that they can call me and I'll answer their questions and I'll give them a quote, that's all they're looking for. Basically, a reporter is, and I won't go on my rant about how lazy they are, but they are basically lazy. They've got like 8 hours to get your story, get as many quotes as they can, figure out all the angles of the story, write it, which is not easy, make sure that they've represented both sides. So basically what they're doing is they've got the shell of the story, they've got their little inverted pyramid, and they're trying to figure out, okay, I need a quote from this person, this person, this person, okay, I gotta call them and get the quote. So they call you, they might ask questions, a good reporter will be interested, a good reporter will try to figure out your point of view, but most of them will be like, hey, I heard about this thing, do you have any comment? That is the classic hallmark of a lazy reporter. So your response is, as a matter of fact, I do. I'm so glad you called me. And then you get into what it is that you want to say, your goal for that little media appearance. If you go silent, well, no, I really don't, then the reporter has to call someone else. They'll never call you again because you made their job harder instead of making it easier. And you've lost the opportunity to really tell your story. So, other thoughts, questions?
And in doubt,
I'm sorry?
when in doubt, cough.
And when in doubt, cough and sneeze. The other thing you should do is when in doubt, when you're in real doubt, like, oh my gosh, I got a potentially huge explosive issue, you should always call your authorizer. And it doesn't hurt sometimes to let NAPSA know. They have dedicated press people, and Dan is quoted so often that reporters call him all the time anyway. It doesn't even matter if it was, somebody dropped a shoe on the way into school this morning, Dan's got a quote. So you want to arm him, you want to make sure he knows what's going on so that he can appear knowledgeable and enhance his status with the press. So you always want to make sure more communication is always better than secrecy. Lesson learned from my mother and the guiding light. So, any other questions? Great. I did not bring business cards. How's that for bad self-promotion? But I'm Googleable, and hopefully not bad Google. So feel free to call anytime. I believe very strongly in charters and what you're all trying to achieve. I know how big the rock is you're trying to push uphill, and anytime I can help, I'm not saying this out of business interest, I'm saying this out of passion. I am eager to do so, so feel free. Thank you very much.
Just on a note about superintendent planning, last week the operators did have a meeting with superintendent planning, and it was very apparent, at least to me anyways, that we really didn't understand authorizers, what our oversight roles were and what we did. And it was also very apparent that he doesn't know exactly what's going on in his own department. 2 years ago, we had an assurance verification audit where they came in and they looked at all of our records. They had 20 different areas that I provided documentation and folders. We got a very good rating. He didn't even know that this department had been conducted. So I think the reason he had made these comments is actually to cover himself, because he's going to be meeting with the state Board of Education. So I think he wants to be able to say he's done something, he's made comments, he's investigating what's going on. So I think, as Stephanie said, you just have to be very careful how you approach things and to be prepared. Now look. The lunch is very good. It really is. But anyways, we're ready for lunch. We're going to start probably again around 1 o'clock with